Okay, welcome back. We were on page 44, just finishing the dictionary list. The next item is on page 46. We talk about special characters or entity characters. There are times, for example, when you want to include text that kind of sort of looks like a tag, and you know where you might actually confuse the machine. For example, you're doing a math equation, and I say, I'm going to start my paragraph tag here, and I'll say, I don't know, my gas mileage is greater than 20 or less than 20. Well, see what it's done? It's saying, wait a minute, what the heck is this little, is there some sort of an element called 20? Yeah, so you need a way of telling the web page that no, this particular less than sign, the angle bracket guy, is not really a tag. I really want an angle bracket. And so what I would do is use this little special character. And this is kind of long, for characters. It starts with an ampersand, the shift 7 guy. And then less than is LT. And then semicolon. Now, I know that's a lot, okay? You have 1, 2, 3, 4 characters that are designed to show what a less than looks like. I know it's a little weird, but let's render it. So I'll go here and show you that it actually does put a less than in there. Cool. So that's the way you do that. So I end up using that a lot when I'm using less than and greater than, just so I don't confuse things. And there's other situations where, you remember what we talked about up here, how it collapses all the white space. And maybe you really wanted it to have a couple spaces right here. I don't want to have to go down here to pre-format and do that. That's one option. But what if I wanted to encode what's called a non-break space right there where the cursor is? So I really wanted an extra space. So you can do that. You do that with ampersand start non-break space NBSP. Okay, non-break space. So I'm going to render that, and you'll see that this guy, well, it's not all that visible, but right there's an extra space in there. Hooray! Now I will tell you, do not use this for alignment. For example, you're trying to make things line up on your screen, and so you go in there and do a bunch of these, right? Don't do that. Because it may look good on your browser, but when it goes to somebody else's browser, the likelihood of this working well is pretty remote. But that's going to introduce one heck of a lot of spaces in there. Yay! Now, didn't it kind of look like it was a heck of a lot? And over here, it looks like it was like, I don't like 3 or 4. So, visually having that entity character thing be so physically large kind of is deceptive. So, let's say I wanted to have something that looked like HTML. So I go in here and I say, I like let's do LT for less than, title, if I could spell it. And then we'll do a greater than, GT for greater than. So I like the title tag is what that's going to say, if I did it right. Yay! So clearly I didn't want that to be rendered by the HTML engine. I didn't want it to be displayed just the way the heck it was. So most people don't use pre-formatting for those kind of things. They use these kinds of things, these entity tags. Okay, so there's an entire section of them there. On page 46, table 2.3, yes, you should look at those. There's a couple of cool ones like copyright and other little special symbols you can put in there. Anyway, it's kind of cool. The ones I use ampersand itself. That has to be escaped. I use less than, I use greater than, I use space. That's what I use a lot. Okay, on page 47, they talk about what's called a structural change. Now, they're introducing a tag here in Chapter 2 that makes no sense whatsoever. And you're just going to take it on faith that later on it's going to make sense. Okay? So, having said that, I'm going to go back up here to my paragraph tag. I'm going to grab this paragraph guy, do copy, and do paste. So now I have two identical. All right, I'm going to change this to what's called a div tag. All right, so the only difference between these two is one of them is a div and one of them is a paragraph. Cool? Let's render it, see what happens. And there is no difference whatsoever, is there? Yeah. So it's kind of hard to explain without getting into it. So I'm gonna tell you some. These are not the droids we're looking for, kind of an answer. And later, I promise it'll make sense. All right. Right now, the purpose for a div is to break things up into sections, so to speak, sort of like the section headers, right? So I could take a chunk of your web page and create some sort of a division, some sort of a way of grouping these things together, because later in some other chapter, we're going to use that div to change the way that section of your text looks. For example, if I go back to my web page, all right, there's a div tag that separates this column, and a div tag for this part at the top, a div tag for all the body, and there's even like a div tag back down here. And so there's 3 or 4 div tags on this page because I wanted this to appear on the left and vertical. And I wanted this to appear all the way across the top. So I needed a way to talk to a section of the web page, and you do that for the div tag. Okay, but once again, for now, these are not the droids you're looking for. Just trust me, div tags are there. Okay. Now HTML5 has introduced some brand new tags that do the things I just talked about. It's kind of sort of like a div tag, but there's a thing called a header tag, a nav tag for navigation, a main, and a footer. It basically does precisely what I have. Let me go back to my goofy web page. Okay, so they have built-in tags for the header. A built-in tag just for doing this navigation, and a built-in tag for the body, and a built-in tag for the footer. Now, we're not going to use that anytime soon. I'm just telling you, that's the way it is. Okay, cool. So I'm not even going to demo that, but later we'll begin to start using those things a little bit later on. All right. The next thing that's kind of interesting is on page 51, which is the anchor tag. And the anchor tag is the hyperlink. Now, why didn't you just call this thing hyperlink? I'm not certain. And first of all, if you were creating a tag that was going to leap to another location, would you call it anchor? I mean, anchor to me means the exact opposite. Anchor means you ain't moving nowhere. You're dropping anchor and you're going to stay put right there. Kind of weird, huh? I mean, if I was writing this thing, I'd call it launchpad or something, because you're leaving. Don't let the door hit you on the way out kind of thing. Not anchor, but whatever. They didn't ask my opinion. Probably a good idea. So anchor tag is a way to make a hyperlink. So let's say, for example, smack dab in the, well, let's don't do something stupid. Let's go down to here that says, I'll create another little paragraph down here that says, take a look at this article called Edge Manage to see if this is something you'd use. Okay. And I want to make this word right here a hyperlink. Okay, cool. So right now it's just text. And so I want to embed a hyperlink right there. You do this with the A tag. So I'm going to say A. I'm going to go ahead and close the A tag off just so I can automatically get this little guy. So the text that shows up, some people call this the description. It's the text that appears between the tags. Okay, the description. That's what shows up in the browser. And this has an attribute. Remember what were the rules for the attribute? Starts lowercase. In this case, the attribute is called href. And for historical reasons that we're not going to get into, href equals, and then something in quotation marks, right? So we could go in here and we could say http www.emmettgray.com articles edgemanage.html. Okay, so let's just look at this for a minute. What I did is I told it, first of all, let's show what it's going to look like on the screen. That's the first thing. All right, you've seen this before, where it's blue and underlined, meaning that it's a hyperlink. So if you hover over it, it'll show you where it's gonna go if you click on something. So let's click on it, and poof, it pops up to a particular web page. So this is an honest-to-God hyperlink. Now, how do you get back? Well, you just go back to the back page, right? Okay, so that's what an A tag does. All right, one more time. A tag has multiple parts. You know, the stuff in between the beginning A tag and ending A tag. Some people call this the description. That's the text that's going to show up inside the page. There's going to be typically a single attribute, although I guess you could have more. An attribute here called href. And then the href is going to actually have the hypertext you put in there. Okay, cool? All right. Now let's talk about links one more time. There are different types of links. This is what's called an absolute link. Absolute means I told it precisely how to get there. http://www, the entire URL, the entire thing, no ambiguity whatsoever. There's another one called relative links. It's a little difficult to describe here because I would basically have to have another web page. So let me create another web page. I'm going to go here and say I'm going to go to add, and I'm going to cheat and go right there to here. And I'm going to call this, I don't know, page 2. All right, so I have page 2, and I might have to put something in here to let you know that we're arrived. So I'm going to say paragraph, hey, this is page 2. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to save that. Woohoo! We'll go back to here. And so now I'm going to do another hyperlink. And say, I don't know, go to page 2. Now I want to create a hyperlink here. So it'll be the A tag, just like before. I'm going to use an href attribute, just like before. Except this time, I'm not going to give it the full path, because this is on my web page, okay? My website has multiple web pages. And so I could go in here and just tell it, instead of saying http blah 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 blah, I could just say page2.html. All right, so that's called what's called a relative link. Now, relative link only work when it's your website, right? When I'm linking to somebody else's website, I have no choice but to use the honest-to-God full one. But inside my web page, yeah, I probably want to do this. And the reason is, what if I rearrange things and move things? I don't want to break my hyperlink. So when I do it this way, when I do it what's called the relative addressing technique, you can move things around and things don't get broke. So yay, it worked. Okay. So relative addressing is a shortcut. Okay, I like shortcuts. I don't like to type. All right. On page 53, they show what's sort of like an organizational chart. It's called a site map of how the web page is put together. In my case, I have a web page called index and a web page called page 2. In their example, they could have multiple ones underneath there. And so your relative addressing could just go, you can go up the pyramid and can go down the pyramid. There's lots of ways you can make this work, but we'll do that again some other time. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark, so this is yet again a good place to stop, and we'll see you again in just a few.